Hey team, how's it going?
Yeah.
All right, so this is a Ask Me Anything session for all the key launches. So feel free to ask us any questions. There's a mic here for the audience. There was a lot of key launches that were announced in the keynote.
You'll go first.
I didn't have a question about one of the key launches. I wasn't aware that it had to be a question about that. So my question was about when you're first starting in your AWS journey and you have your, my question was about when you're first starting about your AWS journey and you have your presence and everyone is jumping on board. I was looking for guidance on creating some kind of like an e-form or something for those requests to better facilitate where to give them what they want access to, rather than just like a Teams message or email or something that they can fill out, and then that directly correlates to what they end up with in the AWS environment. But again, I didn't know it needed to be about the launch. I apologize.
Fine. All good. I'll answer that one. So it probably comes down to like whatever your like internal ticketing and processes are, right? There's also going to be a number of different things about like standard permissions that you might give, like based on roles or based on like different application types and things like that. So it's really more around building the processes of like, maybe it's a ticketing system to get new access. Maybe it's that there's going to be types of roles and types of applications, and you build up your standard permissioning for those. How are you going to do access? Is through a third-party identity provider? Is it through like identity center? Right? There's going to be a number of things there. So you once it gets standardized, you probably won't have as many like ad hoc requests where like the intake form is the most challenging thing that you have. I'd work on getting like access patterns down and like some sort of trends identified first, and then that will kind of help the journey of where you would go there, I think. Yeah.
All right, any other questions related to, please.
Hi, I have a question about some of the network intelligence. So as part of the presentation, at least the way I interpreted it, was going after CSPMs, right? I know you guys didn't use those words, my words, don't have to agree. Specifically around networking. So, I've evaluated various tools, like all the big ones, right? And what I find when they do network reporting is there's a lot of noise. For example, securities group is 000/0. So it's, critical, don't do this. But it's in a private subnet. So yes, it's sloppy, but it's not critical. So my question to you guys is, how mature is your networking analysis? Because as a security architect, right, I get 700, maybe not 700, 200 criticals. Of those 200, only 50 are legitimate criticals. A lot of slop, but they're not critical. So I'd like to see how mature the tool is.
Yeah, so I'll take an attempt at this, and then I'll let Marshall elaborate. So first of all, I think in the keynote session, you must have heard about a service called Blackfoot. It's not necessarily a service, it's something that we use internally to translate all the IP addresses that are coming in and then translating them internally into AWS's private network. That same service is what's used to also surface some of the correlated IP addresses and the domain names in all of our internal security services. One of the other key features that was announced today is the preview of AWS Shield Network Director. Even though I think the name is Shield, but the idea is that we want to provide customers full visibility into where the network policies are, how are they configured, and then what could be the potential misconfigurations around those network policies leading to either exposures or threats. The other correlated element, which is where some of these findings will get aggregated, are in Security Hub. So going back to your question of how are these IP addresses and findings getting prioritized. So if we see like a 0.0.0, how do we make sure that it's not a false positive, right? Yeah, noise. Yeah, Marcia, you wanna?
Yeah, I can take it from there. So essentially, think about like that same scenario. So now with the Security Hub and what was launched today, essentially it'll take a number of different things into account. So like Inspector does a couple things from like a vulnerability assessment, but it also has like network reachability. So it uses automated reasoning to determine like for that security group that's 0.0, is there an actual route from the internet to this instance? And so then it can say like, hey, look, you've got 0.0. It is reachable from the internet. It does have, let's say, a guard duty finding. It's also connected to an S3 bucket that has sensitive data. Like that would be an actual critical versus like, hey, this one has a remote code execution vulnerability that's a 9 CVSS score, but it's actually not reachable from the internet. So like there's not really any other control issues with this machine. So it's really more like a medium level severity. So that we're essentially making those exposure-based findings, but it's going to give that context and correlation of understanding the different inputs instead of just, hey, this is taking something at face value per se. So the exact problem that you're bringing up is what we're addressing in Security Hub with this launch.
Right. I would love to hear more about this. Like, how the Security Hub now actually correlates this data? Because, as you already mentioned, like there is so many tools that can report to Security Hub. Let's say config rule looking for these, 0.0.0 security group, which is producing little to no value, basically in most cases. And then you have like the network analyzer. So sorry, I may be missing names.
Sure.
We have the Inspector that you mentioned, which is also using underneath, I think, the network path analyzer. And now you're having also some new launches like this network something that has been launched today. And you get all of these findings in one place called Security Hub. Are you making with this new release any kind of post-processing of those findings to compile them somehow, or this is like, hey, this is 5 findings regarding the same instance with different severities because they were reported by different tools?
Yeah, so it is exactly what you were saying. It is doing that post-processing of like, we've taken these different signals in, and we essentially call them different like traits, and then bringing that together and like adding the context to it. Like, is it publicly accessible? What vulnerabilities are associated with it? What configuration issues are associated with these resources? Does it have access to things like sensitive data? Like it brings all of that together and then it essentially creates a new exposure finding. So it's not like, and then in that exposure finding, you'd have like the different traits underneath it, which are all the like individual findings that you would have had in the past and had to like correlate together. It's bringing it together and giving you this exposure finding that's the severity is based on the correlation and the context that it's able to provide.
Yeah, so the new user experience in Security Hub will be now where originally it was acting as a cloud security posture management tool and then aggregating the findings from not just configurations or misconfigurations, but also our partner tools. The new experience now includes things like not only showing you that there are individual findings which might be at times stateless, because guard duty found a threat many days ago on an instance, there was a finding, and then Inspector found a vulnerability, there was a finding, and then there was a misconfiguration, but now there will be correlations with exposures. So imagine there's an EC2 instance, it was having an open vulnerability. Because of that vulnerability, there was an RDP brute force that got exposed, and that RDP brute force happened because there was an open port or an SCP. So in the exposure finding, you'll be able to see now what are the correlated findings that led to that exposure. And then it'll also show you the network path that the threat actor or that bad malicious activity took. And that attack path will be seen like in a graph format. So you'll be able to see like in a visual pattern, what are the primary resources that are impacted, and then also what are the secondary resources that potentially that you could like now go in and for supply chain security make sure that that threat's not only manifesting in the primary resource, but also some of the attached resources. The other thing that's important is that earlier customers had to go in and look at IAM entity roles or AWS resource names and then filter those things within Security Hub or wherever they were aggregating the findings. Now you'll be able to easily see those correlations within the Security Hub console without having to go in and jump around. So it's all on the theme of like simplifying security by bringing in this aggregated correlation and context in one place.
Sorry, I'm probably going to end up being a pain. All right, so one small follow-up and then completely different topic. When you talk about network, layering the network information, right, and saying it's publicly accessible, I think as a person, if someone tells me an EC2 is publicly accessible, to me, cognitively, I think, well, it's in a public subnet and you can directly get to it. But a lot of tools, I don't know about necessarily here, but I can tell you other tools will say it's publicly accessible, which is technically true if you go through an ALB, through a public subnet, and 6 layers down, it can get down to this EC2. So technically it is publicly accessible, but not what I as a person would characterize as public. Anyway, it's just a detail. It's just a comment. So again, my experience, which again may not be reflective here, is that it'll say a lot of things are publicly accessible, badass security group, but yeah, you have to go through 6 things and it's not, a lot of that context is lost. Anyway, completely different topic, remediation. I would like to know, I'd like for you to expand upon like some primary use cases around remediation that you guys are focusing on, and as a follow-on to that, if you remediate it, what are your thoughts on creating drift, right? So let's say I am a sloppy developer, right? So I wrote some crappy Terraform code, right? That does some ridiculous thing, and then now you remediate me because I'm a dummy, right? Can you talk me through like some of the typical remediation use cases that you guys are looking at and your thoughts on drift?
Yeah, I'm a sloppy developer too. But no. To your point though, one of the things that we introduced in the new launch of Security Hub is just integration with ticketing systems, because of a lot of the feedback that we get is about, well, if I do remediate something, I'm going to have drift, or the security team doesn't have the context into what they can remediate and how they can remediate it. So we're doing a number of different things in that area, and one of the other launches that we had was code scanning through Inspector. So if you kind of think of the journey of vulnerabilities and what we're monitoring in AWS, now you have Q developer that can see security issues like in an ID while you're developing. You've got code security that's managed by like a central security team, and then Inspector also has integrations with CI/CD pipelines that can block a pipeline from running if based on different vulnerabilities, and then all the way through knowing if images get deployed and what container or where they're running and things like that. So when it comes to the remediation aspect, we're trying to do a more integrated approach of all the way from the developer who types in the code and monitoring it along the way. That way you know where it needs to be fixed versus introducing remediation capabilities that create a mess in an environment.
I think if you look at the journey, like you said, from a software development standpoint, it starts by shifting left. So what we are doing is using Inspector and code scanning. It is both. So Security Hub enables you to run automated runbooks, which could be a combination of automation rules that you've created. So if you have an incident response runbook, you can today easily import that runbook into Security Hub and then execute that. Now with the new feature, what you'll be able to do is create configuration rules to say, hey, this finding type or this exposure type is highly critical, and I need to go run a runbook which is associated with that. Or you could say if a resource matches a finding where it's network reachable, what is the preventative controls or policies that you would want to take? So that is what a typical incident response action would be. But if you go back to where it actually originated, which is the developer lifecycle, so what we're doing is using generative AI and using automation in the developer lifecycle, also helping when developers are writing code or calling vulnerable APIs or packages, letting them know that there is a vulnerability in this package and what should be the remediation steps taken by the developer to fix that as well. So it's both, like where you can do active IR as a security operations team, and you can build that into the development lifecycle as well.
Cool. Anybody else? Any questions?
Any other questions related to the launches in the keynote? Or any other general questions?
Is there any stand where we can have a look at these new features of Security Hub? I'm mostly interested in this, as the old Security Hub has a couple of the deficiencies that I was interested to look how they have been solved in the new release.
I didn't hear anything.
Sorry? The question was mainly about is there any stand where I can learn more in depth regarding new Security Hub related launches?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to have, certainly, there's multiple blog posts coming out about not only like how you get started with the new Security Hub experience, but also deep diving into like some of the exposure findings, and one of the colleagues on my team wrote that. So you'll be able to see plenty of that. A couple things to note is it's also in public preview, and you can get started kind of free of charge. So definitely go in there, test it out, and read those blogs.
Yeah, so there'll be 2 sessions that I know of, like we'll dive deeper into some of this stuff with actually demos. There's one at 4:30 today, which will talk about, it's TDR 301, which talks about all the key innovations in our detection and response portfolio. That'll cover AWS Security Hub preview. And like Marshall said, there'll be blog posts coming out, and then we also will do activation days, which is customer-facing sessions that we do where you can sign up and just watch how the service works. It's actually run by the community of our technical field experts who will showcase how some of these services work. And then because it's preview, you can easily go in and just sign up for the new Security Hub and then try it out yourself as well.
Yep. There's also a session tomorrow at 3 for implementing security best practices, where we're going to give a demo of it as well.
Sorry. By the way, full disclosure, I work for Stacklet, which is based off Cloud Custodian. I don't know if you're familiar with Cloud Custodian. So I work for Stacklet, which is the engine is Cloud Custodian. Just full disclosure. Just to be straight up. Okay. Several years ago, there was a push towards ABAC, attributes-based access control, right? So in the resource policy, you'd have $project name or something, right? Some variable. And I don't hear that anymore. So I'm wondering, is AWS's position, and you may not know this, it's definitely out of left field. Is the position to move away from ABAC, or is it still a supported, kind of sort of considered good practice? Because I don't hear about it anymore.
Yeah, so what we did in that space, one thing is ABAC could get complicated, right? So, but when we have things like we've expanded the amount of accounts that you could use, and some of the different controls that we've introduced through AWS organizations, it made it easier to split these up by accounts. The ABAC use case was more of, so you've got multiple people in a single account that you don't want them accessing each other's resources, so you had to limit that based on the policy versus splitting up workloads based on accounts, so then you didn't have to do the splitting of those policies or the permissions to that single account, and it made that a little more simple. But there are certainly still use cases, and we've added other tags and things that have made ABAC easier over the years. But yeah, so there's still use cases if you had multiple roles or like people, personas in a single account, then it's still definitely applicable. But yeah, it made it a little easier with like account segmentation.
All right, I think we're out of time, but thanks a lot for joining. If you have any questions, please follow up. There'll also be like other Chalk Talks and sessions happening that'll cover all these key launches. Thank you.